I bought a house in secret. Paid cash. Every nail. Every wall of paint. I imagined family dinners. My son carving roast. His wife smiling. Instead, I found strangers touring my kitchen. My daughter-in-law held stolen keys. Selling my future. Planning my exile. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. On my 62nd birthday, I stopped lying to myself. The apartment was too quiet. Thomas had been gone 8 months. The walls still smelled like his aftershave. Old Spice and emptiness. I sat at our kitchen table. The same table where we'd counted bills for 30 years. Where we'd planned vacations we couldn't afford. Where he'd read me the newspaper every Sunday morning. Now it was just me. And silence. The city moved outside my window. Sirens threading through traffic. People walking dogs. Living their lives. I watched them from behind glass. Like watching television with the sound off. I retired that Tuesday. Walked into the Transit Authority office. Signed the papers. 34 years of scheduling buses. Done. My supervisor asked if I was sure. I told him I was sure about everything now. Thomas's sedan sat in the parking garage. Cherry red. He'd spent weekends polishing chrome. Tuning the engine. Now it collected dust and parking tickets. I sold it to the first person who called. Cash only. No negotiations. The money sat in my checking account. More money than I'd ever seen at once. $40,000 from the car. My pension starting. Thomas's life insurance finally cleared. For the first time in decades, I could breathe without counting. That's when I started walking. Every morning at 7. Down Maple Street. Past the bodega where Mrs. Chen always waved. Past the playground where teenagers smoked behind the swings. I walked until my legs ached. Until my lungs burned. Until I remembered I had a body. 3 weeks in, I found Canary Street. The duplex sat like a patient grandmother. Brick walls. Wide front steps. A door painted cheerful yellow. The color of dandelions. Of school buses. Of hope that doesn't know better. The realtor was young. Eager. She wore high heels on cobblestones. Talked fast about investment potential. Gentrification trends. Market appreciation. I didn't care about markets. I cared about the mint growing wild in the back courtyard. I cared about sunlight flooding the upstairs kitchen. I cared about the way the building felt solid. Permanent. Like it would outlast whatever came next. The price was fair. Below market, the realtor said. The previous owner had died. His children wanted quick cash. No inspection period. No mortgage contingency. Perfect. I made the offer that afternoon. Cash. Full asking price. Close in 2 weeks. The realtor looked surprised. She'd probably expected months of back and forth. Credit checks. Loan approvals. The usual dance. I signed the papers with Thomas's fountain pen. The one I'd bought him for our 25th anniversary. The one he'd used to write grocery lists. Birthday cards. Love letters when we were young. Now it signed my name on a deed. Nora Hale. Sole owner. But not quite sole. I'd learned things since Thomas died. About taxes. About liability. About keeping your business private. Margot, my old neighbor, worked in housing law. She'd seen too many widows lose everything to grown children with good intentions and bad advice. Create an LLC, she'd told me. Keep the assets separate. Protect yourself. So I did. Hale and Finch LLC. Named after the birds Thomas and I used to count in Riverside Park. Every Sunday after church, he'd bring his binoculars. I'd bring coffee in a thermos. We'd sit on the same bench for hours. The Hale was for him. The Finch was for me. Small, quick, harder to catch than you'd think. The contractors started the next Monday. Sanding floors that hadn't been touched in decades. Fixing joists that sagged with age. Replacing windows that let in more cold than light. I visited every day, brought them coffee, sandwiches from the deli. They were good men, careful with the old bones of the building. They understood what I wanted. Not renovation, restoration. The banister got 3 coats of deep gloss paint. Dark green like forest shadows. You could check your reflection in it. The floors got stripped down to raw wood. Then sealed. Then polished until they glowed. Upstairs, I painted the bedroom pale yellow. Like morning light. Like the inside of lemons. Like the door that had brought me here. Downstairs, I chose cream for the walls. Warm cream. The color of good paper. Of pearls worn smooth. Of patience. The kitchen got new faucets. A deep porcelain sink. Shelves for dishes I didn't own yet. Counter space for meals I hadn't planned. I imagined Sunday dinners. Adrian and Lila at the table. Maybe grandchildren someday. Voices filling rooms that had been quiet too long. Adrian was my only child. Born when I was 28. After 3 miscarriages that broke my heart in different ways each time. He'd been worth the wait. Worth the fear. Worth every sleepless night. Now he was 34. An EMT team leader. He saved lives for work. Came home exhausted. Fell asleep watching baseball. He'd married Lila 3 years ago. A small wedding. Just family. She'd worn my grandmother's dress. Talked about fresh starts. New traditions. Building something beautiful together. I'd liked her then. Her energy. Her ideas. Her way of making Adrian laugh. Now I wasn't sure what I liked. Since Thomas died, Lila had opinions. About my finances. My living situation. My future. She spoke in soft voices about difficult subjects. Like I was a problem to be managed. A burden to be distributed. She'd organized my bills into spreadsheets. Color-coded by priority. She'd researched senior communities. Active lifestyle. Social opportunities. Transportation provided. I'd nodded. Smiled. Let her talk. But I didn't sign anything. Didn't commit to anything. Didn't hand over anything that mattered. The duplex was finished on a Thursday. I walked through empty rooms that smelled like fresh paint. Like possibility. Like mine. I set the date. 2 weeks away. A Friday evening. I'd cook lemon chicken. Adrian's favorite since he was 7. I'd tell them about the building. About our new beginning. About how we could be close without me being small. I bought groceries. Planned the menu. Imagined their faces when I showed them the key. I should have known better. I should have remembered that some people don't wait for invitations. They make their own doors. Take what they need. Apologize later if they apologize at all. But I was thinking like a mother. Like a woman who'd spent 40 years putting others first. Like someone who still believed in asking nicely. I would learn better soon enough. The day before my reveal, I drove to Canary Street. Just to check the mailbox. Touch up the paint on the window trim. Small things. The kind of things you do when something matters. I parked across the street. Pulled the keys from my purse. Looked up at my yellow door. Music was coming from inside. Not my music. Not my radio. Music that belonged to strangers. A sandwich board stood on the sidewalk. White letters on black. Open house, Urban Nest Collective. My chest went tight. Like someone was pulling strings inside my ribs. People walked in and out of my building. My door. They carried coffee cups. Smiled like they belonged there. A young woman stood by the entrance. Clipboard in hand. Top knot in her hair. She greeted everyone like a hostess at a dinner party I hadn't been invited to. I sat in my car. Engine running. Heat blasting. But I was cold anyway. The woman with the clipboard was talking to a couple. Young parents. Stroller. Diaper bag. Hope written across their faces like advertising. She told them about the tour starting downstairs. About community workspace. About children exploring without screens. Her voice carried across the street. sweet as artificial sugar. I rolled down my window. Let the cold air bite my face. The couple asked whose building it was. The woman smiled wider, talked about donor funding, family partnerships, equitable spaces. She asked if they had children. Said they were prioritizing founding families. Founding families. In my building. With my deed. Under my name. I got out of the car. Crossed the street. Walked up to my own front door like a stranger asking for directions. The woman with the clipboard looked right through me. Her eyes moved past my gray hair, my sensible coat, my question about whose building this was. Donor funded, she repeated. Like a recording, like someone had programmed her with acceptable answers. I stepped inside, into my own hallway, where strangers admired my restored banister, where voices that weren't mine filled rooms I'd painted with my own hopes. The ground floor buzzed with activity. People touching my walls, commenting on the exposed brick, making plans for space that wasn't theirs to plan. A woman in white sneakers moved through the crowd. Pale blazer, television smile. She talked about stackable value, about intergenerational wealth transfer. She talked about growing up below 14th Street, about knowing what this neighborhood needed. The woman was Lila, my daughter-in-law, leading tours through my house, selling my future to strangers, using words like vision, like transformation, like inevitable. I didn't interrupt, didn't scream, didn't demand explanations. I learned. Lila guided a group into the courtyard. My courtyard, where mint grew wild and stubborn, where I'd imagined quiet mornings with coffee and newspapers. She talked about herb gardens, sensory paths, community growing spaces. Then she looked up, at the second floor, at windows I'd replaced with my own money. She leaned closer to the young couple, whispered about upstairs, about monthly salons, about ethical investors and founders and artists, about recording a podcast, about having a private backer, family money, someone who believed in the vision. She glanced at her phone, smiled that television smile. He's family, she said. My heart hammered against my ribs. Adrian, my son, my only child, the boy I'd raised to tell the truth, to ask before taking, to knock before entering. I backed toward the door, through the crowd, past the clipboard woman, into the cold air that felt warmer than my own house. My phone buzzed. Text message. From Adrian. Lunch tomorrow? I have something to show you. My fingers shook as I typed back. Late lunch? We're walking an incredible space with a partner. It's on Canary Street. I stared at my yellow door. At strangers walking through it. At the sandwich board announcing the future of my building. The key felt heavy in my coat pocket. Real in a way nothing else felt real. I got back in my car. Started the engine. Drove home to my quiet apartment where Thomas's aftershave still lived in the bathroom cabinet. Where I could think, plan, remember who I used to be before grief made me soft. The reveal would still happen. Tomorrow, at my building, with my son and his wife. But it wouldn't be dinner table gentle. Wouldn't be lemon chicken and shared hopes. It would be a test. A test of whether family meant asking permission. Or just taking what you wanted. A test of whether my yellow door belonged to me. Or to whoever had the better story about what should happen next. I sat in my kitchen. At the table where Thomas and I had made all our big decisions. Where we'd planned our life together. Where I now planned to fight for what was mine. Some battles you choose. Some battles choose you. This one had been choosing me for months. Every spreadsheet Lila created, every suggestion about senior communities, every soft voice talking about my future like I wasn't in the room. Tomorrow, I would stop being someone who got chosen. Tomorrow, I would be someone who chose back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table. The same table where Thomas balanced our checkbook. where we signed tax returns, where we made decisions that mattered. Now I made tea, opened my laptop, logged into the finance portal Lila had streamlined for me. Color-coded, organized, efficient. I'd let her do it. After the funeral, when everything felt too heavy to lift alone, she'd said it would help. Make things easier. Give me one less worry. I should have worried more. I clicked through screens, bank accounts, credit cards, utility bills, everything neat and tidy and not quite right. Then I found it. Activity log, recent logins, dates and times and device names. There, 3 days ago, a login from Lila MBP, MacBook Pro, her computer accessing my accounts. The timestamp matched perfectly, the day my painters finished the yellow door. She'd logged in to authenticate utility setup. For an address on Canary Street. My address, my utilities, my name on accounts I'd never opened. The tea went cold in my hands. My phone rang, Adrian's name on the screen. My son calling his mother. I answered. He sounded excited, happy, like he had good news to share. He told me about a community project Lila had found. Family-friendly co-working. Brilliant concept, he said. Finally a way to bring her parents closer. The founders' unit upstairs would be perfect for transitional housing. Transitional, like I was passing through. Like I was temporary. I thought of the lemon chicken I'd planned. The dinner that would never happen. He talked faster. About moving quickly. About spaces that could disappear. About opportunities that don't wait. A relative of the donor might accelerate the timeline. If they covered taxes and minor renovations. If they provided bridge funding. He mentioned Thomas's savings. Said Dad would have wanted his money to build something lasting. Thomas's money. My money now. Their bridge to my building. I asked who the donor was. Anonymous for now, Adrian said. The words came out before I could stop them. It's me. Silence filled the phone line. Long silence. The kind that changes everything. Then Adrian's voice. Soft. Confused. Like he was talking to someone he'd never met. Mom, he said. How long have you been doing this alone? Long enough to remember I'm capable, I told him. I asked if he knew about the open house. About the strangers touring my kitchen. About the sandwich board on my sidewalk. He said no. Too quickly. The way people lie when the truth is complicated. He said Lila mentioned a community group was visioning. Theoretical planning. Nothing concrete. Theoretical. Like my money. Like my building. Like my future. I told him we would meet tomorrow. All 3 of us. At the building. No crowds this time. After he hung up, I called Margot. My old neighbor. Housing rights paralegal. The one person who'd never suggested I needed managing. She lived in a rent-controlled apartment. Kept documents in manila folders. Stored opinions in plain sentences. I told her everything. The secret purchase. The open house. The forged authorizations. The family meeting planned for tomorrow. Margot listened without interrupting. The way lawyers listen. Like every word might matter later. Then she told me what to do. Change the locks immediately. Change all the codes. Screenshot everything. Save every document. Print hard copies. Ask better questions than they're prepared to answer. She knew a locksmith. Available tonight. Cash payment. No records except mine. She knew about families who take. Who justify. Who smile while they steal your choices. The locksmith arrived at midnight. Older man. Calloused hands. He understood urgency without explanation. We worked by streetlight. New cylinders in both doors. New keypad for the side entrance. Fresh codes that belonged only to me. He left me 6 keys. Heavy brass. Still warm from cutting. I held them in my palm. Felt their weight. Their solidity. Their refusal to open for anyone else. Then I went inside my building. My duplex with the yellow door. I walked through rooms that smelled like fresh paint and betrayal. In the kitchen, I opened every cabinet, checked every drawer, looking for signs of violation I hadn't noticed before. Coffee cups in the sink. Not mine. Crumbs on the counter. From food I hadn't eaten. A business card tucked behind the window latch. Urban Nest Collective. Contact information. Founding member rates. They'd been here multiple times. Planning. Measuring. Deciding what belonged where. In my space. With keys I'd never given them. I took pictures of everything. Every crumb. Every fingerprint on my fresh paint. Every piece of evidence that someone had made themselves at home. The camera attached to my keychain. Margot's gift. Insurance against forgetfulness. Against being told I'd imagined things. I set it to record tomorrow's meeting. Some conversations need witnesses, even secret ones. At dawn, I brewed coffee in my real kitchen. The one in my old apartment. Where Thomas's coffee cup still sat in the dish drainer. Where everything was exactly as I'd left it. But I was different, changed by the night, by the locks, by the keys in my pocket, by the knowledge that tomorrow would test more than ownership. It would test whether being family meant anything, whether blood mattered more than opportunity, whether love could survive the truth. I dressed carefully, gray slacks, navy cardigan, pearl earrings Thomas gave me for our 30th anniversary. Armor disguised as grandmother clothes. Today I would learn who my son really was. Whether he was someone who asked permission or someone who took what he wanted. Whether he was his father's child or his wife's husband. Whether he was still my boy. Or whether grief had stolen that too. The yellow door waited, patient as judgment, bright as warning. Today would answer all my questions. Today would change everything. I arrived at the yellow door at 10 o'clock sharp. The building looked different in morning light. Smaller somehow. More mine. I unlocked the new lock. Stepped inside. Breathed the smell of fresh paint and possibility. The dining table I'd bought from the closing church sat ready. Solid oak. Scarred by years of potluck dinners and church meetings. Perfect for hard conversations. I set out 3 coffee cups. White porcelain. Nothing fancy. Nothing that could break if voices got raised. The camera on my keychain sat silent in my cardigan pocket. Recording everything. Remembering what I might forget. At 10:15, footsteps climbed the front stairs. Lila's voice carried through the door. Bright as advertising. Excited as Christmas morning. She was telling Adrian this was going to be amazing. Life-changing. Exactly what the family needed. I opened the door before they could knock. Lila came in first. Arms spread wide like she was embracing the future. She moved through my hallway like she owned it. Like she'd always owned it. She called my name with the voice she used for difficult clients. Warm. Professional. Slightly condescending. She said she was thrilled I was investing in the future. We could align visions now. Make this work for everyone. I asked which vision she meant. The one where I was the donor. Or the one where I was just another signature on her paperwork. I slid a printed email across the oak table. The authorization she'd sent to Urban Nest Collective. My name at the bottom. Her words in the middle. She barely looked at it. Said it was just a placeholder. I'd been grieving. She was building momentum for when I felt ready. Everything plug and play, she said. I asked whose plug and whose play. Adrian reached for the printout. Read it slowly. His face changed as he read. Color drained from his cheeks. He said Lila's name. Quiet. Disappointed. Like he was seeing her for the first time. Lila kept talking. About opportunities to incubate good. About assets becoming city resources. About transformation instead of taking. She used words like sacred. Like community. Like love. I slid another document across the table. The Draft Family Trust. Lila listed as managing trustee. Community partners as beneficiaries. Adrian and I appeared on page 6. After the glossary, Adrian asked who drafted this. A friend, Lila said. Non-binding until I signed. She told me not to make this litigious. This was about love. I told her love knocks before it repaints someone's kitchen. Love doesn't host open houses in houses that aren't open. Adrian looked back and forth between us. His mother and his wife. Two women who both wanted to protect him from different things. He said he wanted us closer. Work was constant triage. Home felt the same. Lila had convinced him this would give them a center. A place to breathe. A place to build something lasting. My heart softened when he said it. My son, my only child, still trying to fix everything for everyone. I told him he could build center without stealing north. Family doesn't require theft. Proximity doesn't require lies. Here were my terms. They would treat this building as mine until I said otherwise. They would return every key that wasn't theirs. We would decide together if the ground floor became anything collective. And if they wanted proximity, they would earn it with honesty. Not with events. Not with vision boards. Not with other people's money. Lila's smile grew thinner, sharp as paper cuts. She said I was making something beautiful small. Limiting potential. Thinking like yesterday instead of tomorrow. I told her I was making it real. Real has boundaries. Real has ownership. Real requires permission. I stood up, walked to the yellow door, opened it wide. The morning air rushed in. Cold, clean, honest. Lila gathered her papers, her plans, her vision of my future without me in charge. She moved toward the door. Stopped, turned back. She said she'd overstepped. She was excited. She saw possibility everywhere and sometimes forgot to ask first. But this building could be special. Could serve the community. Could be more than just another property investment. I told her it already was special. It was mine. That made it the most special thing in my world. Adrian stood in the middle of the room. Caught between his mother and his wife. Between the woman who raised him and the woman he'd chosen. He looked exhausted, older than his 34 years. Like someone who'd been fighting a war he hadn't known he was in. He asked if we could try again. Start over. Find a way forward that honored everyone. I told him honor begins with truth. Truth begins with respect. Respect begins with asking permission before taking what isn't yours. He nodded, slow, like someone accepting a diagnosis they didn't want to hear. He would talk to Lila. Really talk. About boundaries. About respect. About the difference between building something together and taking what someone else built. They left through the yellow door. Into the morning sunlight. Into whatever conversation waited for them at home. I closed the door behind them. Turned the new lock. Heard the solid click of security. The house settled around me. Mine again. Quiet again. Safe again. I made fresh coffee. Sat at the oak table. Listened to the building breathe. Outside, the city continued its daily business. Cars passed. Dogs walked their humans. Life moved forward like it always does. But inside my yellow door, everything had changed. I'd drawn lines. Set boundaries. Claimed my space in the world. I'd remembered who I was before grief made me careful. Before loneliness made me grateful for any attention. I was Nora Hale, widow, mother, owner of this building with the yellow door. And that was enough. That was everything. 3 days passed in silence. No phone calls, no text messages, no knock on my yellow door. I spent those days learning my building. Every creak, every shadow, every sound the old pipes made when water moved through them. I mapped the morning light. How it moved across the kitchen floor. Where it pooled at noon. When it faded into evening gold. This was mine. All of it. The light and the shadows. The creaks and the silence. On the 4th day, my phone buzzed. Text message from Lila. A photo of a pregnancy test. 2 pink lines clear as accusations. Then words underneath. I'm late. We need to talk. My hands shook holding the phone. A baby. My grandchild. Thomas's great-grandchild who would never know his laugh. I stared at those pink lines. At the future they promised. At the complications they carried. I typed back slowly. Congratulations. Make a prenatal appointment. And return the keys by tomorrow. No softness. No grandmother excitement. Just facts. Just boundaries that pregnancy couldn't cross. Adrian called that evening. His voice sounded hollow, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. He said he hadn't known about the fake authorization. Hadn't known about the draft trust. Hadn't known about the open house until it was happening. He'd thought Lila was just exploring options. Building momentum for when I felt ready to move forward. He should have asked better questions, he said. Should have been more than a passenger in his own life. I told him passengers don't drive. Passengers go where someone else decides. Passengers don't get to complain about the destination. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised me. He said he was sorry. Not sorry for Lila. Sorry for himself. For becoming someone who let other people make his choices. For forgetting that being kind doesn't mean being weak. That helping doesn't mean disappearing. After he hung up, I sat in my old kitchen. At the table where Thomas and I had made our life together. I thought about the baby coming. About family. About second chances and first boundaries. The doorbell rang. A courier with a thick envelope. Inside, official letterhead. Legal language. A cease and desist order from a law firm representing Urban Nest Collective. They accused me of interference with planned programming. Of creating a hostile environment for female leadership. Of blocking community development through selfish property hoarding. I read it twice. Then I called Margot. She listened without interrupting. Asked me to read specific sections aloud. Took notes in her careful paralegal handwriting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. Classic intimidation tactics, she said. They're trying to use public relations as leverage against an old woman. We'd respond with facts. File a police report about unauthorized access. Document everything. Build a record that showed who behaved like adults. I asked if we should sue them back. Not unless you want to spend a year hating mornings, she said. Better to let them dig their own grave with paper trails and empty threats. The next day I installed a smart mail slot. Something Thomas would have loved. Stubborn and practical and impossible to fool. I set a small table by the front door. Left a note requesting the return of keys that weren't theirs to keep. By afternoon, one key ring appeared. Brass tags labeled boiler and courtyard and back gate. But not the front door key. Lila had kept the most important one. I called the locksmith again. Explained the situation. He arrived within the hour. As he worked, I thought about boundaries. How they need reinforcement sometimes. How respect requires vigilance. 2 days later, Lila came to my old apartment. She looked different. Smaller somehow. No makeup. Hair pulled back simply. Like someone who'd stopped trying to manage impressions. She said she was sorry before the tea had even steeped. Said she'd grown up watching her mother hustle rent from nothing. She'd learned that if you want something to exist, you talk about it like it already does. You create momentum. You build belief. She'd wanted a life where her child wouldn't hear adults whispering about money after bedtime. She'd wanted security so badly she'd skipped asking permission. She'd convinced herself my grief was her invitation. I told her grief wasn't permission. Grief was just grief. Heavy and private and mine to carry. She nodded. Slow. Like someone accepting a hard truth. She admitted she hadn't returned the front door key. Not as a power move. As a shame move. She'd thrown it in the trash rather than admit she'd used it without asking. I believed parts of what she said. The parts about fear, about wanting security, about growing up poor and scared. But I also remembered the sandwich board, the draft trust, the way she'd placed herself at the center of my future. I gave her my terms. Non-negotiable. Adrian goes to counseling with her. 4 sessions minimum. Real counseling. Not life coaching or couples meditation or vision boarding. She enrolls in a basic finance course. The kind taught at community college under fluorescent lights, where they teach budgeting instead of disruption. And we talk in plain nouns from now on. Not verbs dressed up as values. Not vision statements disguised as conversation. Her jaw tightened. She said I was making this punitive. I told her I was making it safe. Children need safe more than they need ambitious. When she left, I stood in my doorway, hand on the frame where Thomas used to check the locks every night. I didn't ask the question that still lived in my chest. Would you have stopped if I hadn't caught you? Because I knew the answer wouldn't change what I had to do now. Some people learn. Some people just learn to be more careful next time. Time would tell which kind Lila was. But either way, my yellow door would stay locked. My boundaries would stay clear. My building would stay mine. I'd learned the difference between a key and an invitation. Between family and ownership. Between love and permission. And I'd learned something else. Something Thomas had tried to teach me for 40 years. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is say no. Sometimes love means boundaries. Sometimes family means choosing who gets to stay. The first Sunday after our terms, Adrian showed up with bagels and a toolbox. He stood on my yellow doorstep. Hands full, eyes uncertain, like someone asking for forgiveness without saying the words. The upstairs bath drips, he said. I could take a look. I let him in, made coffee, watched him spread tools on the kitchen counter like he was laying out surgical instruments. We worked side by side, the way Thomas and I used to when we were young and equally broke. One person held the light. The other cursed nicely at stubborn bolts. We replaced washers that had given up years ago, tightened supply lines that leaked hope into the basement, fixed things that had been broken longer than they should have been. Adrian worked with careful hands, the same hands that restart hearts for a living, that pull people back from edges they didn't know they were standing on. Now those hands fixed my faucet, stopped the drip that had been driving me slowly insane. We argued amiably about cream cheese, plain versus everything bagels, whether the Mets had any chance this year. Normal things, father and son things. If fathers and sons could argue about baseball over bathroom repairs. In the afternoon, I set 2 bowls of soup on the front stoop. The neighborhood came alive around us. Bike bells ringing down Canary Street. A kid practicing trumpet somewhere. Scales climbing toward something that might become music. Someone was convincing an espresso machine to cooperate. Steam hissing, metal clanging, the sound of small business and big dreams. Adrian cleared his throat, looked at his soup instead of at me. He said he'd wanted, for once, to be a solution instead of a burden. I told him he didn't have to be a solution. Just present, just honest, just himself. He nodded, stared at the yellow door that had caused all this trouble, all this truth. He asked if I was going to keep both apartments. The old one and this one. For now, I said. I like the idea of choosing my neighbors. My phone buzzed. Text message from Lila. A screenshot. Course enrollment confirmation. Budgeting fundamentals. Tuesdays and Thursdays. Room 204. Community College of Brooklyn. Another message followed. A selfie from a waiting room. Pamphlet in her hands titled Couples Therapy 101. She didn't smile in the photo. Looked tired. Like someone choosing the uncool thing in service of a cooler future. Progress, I said, showing Adrian the phone. His eyes watered with complicated relief. The kind that comes when someone you love finally gets help they didn't know they needed. That evening I lay in the upstairs bedroom. Listened to the city settling into night. The duplex creaked honest old building sounds. Pipes expanding. Floorboards remembering the weight of day. I thought about the first sandwich board. About strangers touring my kitchen. About legal threats and pregnancy tests and sons who carry toolboxes like apologies. I couldn't know what kind of mother-in-law I would be next. What kind of grandmother? What kind of woman who owns buildings and sets boundaries? But I knew I would never again pretend not to hear when someone else's plan walked up my steps uninvited. Summer tilted over the city like a lazy cat. Heat shimmered off asphalt. Fire hydrants opened for children who didn't ask permission first. The mint in my courtyard doubled in arrogance. Sent runners under the fence. Claimed territory it had no right to claim. I let it grow wild. Sometimes taking over is exactly what the space needs. Children chalked a dragon on my sidewalk. Started small, got bigger, refused to end at reasonable boundaries. The dragon curved around lampposts, crossed property lines, breathed colorful fire onto concrete that had forgotten how to play. I bought more chalk. Left it on my stoop. Anonymous encouragement for unauthorized art. The yellow door slung light into my hallway like hope rehearsing for opening night. I hosted small dinners. Nothing fancy. No salons or vision boards or disruption theory. Clara from the flower stall brought stories along with lilies. May from the laundromat folded conversation into perfect squares like the towels she pressed. Real neighbors, real friendship, real community built one dinner at a time. Urban Nest sent one last email. We remain open to collaboration under the original vision. Margot filed it under no thank you. Her favorite folder, growing thicker every year. Lila completed the course. Grudgingly at first. Then with nerdy interest that surprised even her. She learned about emergency funds. About the difference between assets and liabilities. About building security instead of chasing opportunities. She started a savings account. Small deposits. Regular contributions. The kind of boring financial health her mother never taught her. The counseling sessions were messy. Love always is when it's honest. But Adrian learned to ask better questions. Is this about control or care? What do you need versus what do you want? Lila learned to answer out loud. Instead of managing his responses. Instead of fixing problems he hadn't asked her to fix. 4 months later, Lila gave birth to a boy. Lungs that believed in arrival. Fists that demanded attention. Indignation at being forced into the cold bright world. In the quiet after the storm of family texts, Lila sent me a simple message. Will you be his guardian if something happens to us? We'll sign whatever you need. And the building? Keep it yellow. Keep it yours. I stared at the baby photo. The wrinkles. The fists. The ancient wisdom in brand new eyes. I let the question sit until it weighed what it should. Heavy as responsibility. Light as love freely given. I replied carefully. Yes to the boy. For the building, I've already named a successor trustee. Until then, come on Sundays. Bring him to smell the mint. Some people never learn. Some people learn just enough to stop handing strangers the pen. I had learned the difference between a key and an invitation. Between family and ownership. Between love and permission to take what isn't yours. And Canary Street, quiet under the weight of its own stories, learned my name. The yellow door stays yellow. The building stays mine. The boundaries stay clear. But the mint keeps growing. The dragon keeps breathing fire. And Sunday soups simmer on stoves that remember what family sounds like. When it's honest. When it's chosen. When it's built on asking instead of taking. That's when family sounds like home. 1 year later, I know the rhythm of my building like prayer. Morning light slides across the kitchen floor at 7:15. The radiator coughs awake at 7:30. Mrs. Chen's dog barks his hello to the world at 8 sharp. These are my sounds now. My light. My predictable mornings. The baby comes every Sunday. Adrian carries him up my front steps like precious cargo. Lila follows with the diaper bag and nervous energy that still hasn't learned to rest. But she's trying. I can see her trying. The boy is 10 months old. Thomas Michael Hale. Named for his great-grandfather who would have spoiled him senseless. He has Adrian's curious eyes. My stubborn chin. Thomas's laugh when something strikes him funny. He crawls across my floors like he owns them. Pulls himself up on furniture I bought for quiet evenings alone. Claims space the way children do. Complete. Unquestioned. I let him. This morning he discovers the mint in the courtyard. Grabs fistfuls of leaves. Brings them to his nose like a sommelier testing vintage. The smell makes him sneeze. Makes him laugh. Makes him grab more. Lila watches from the kitchen window. Her hands wrapped around coffee I brewed in my old percolator. She's learned to drink it black. Says cream is an unnecessary expense. Says she's saving for Tommy's college fund. She puts away $25 every week. Small bills folded into an envelope marked education. The kind of boring planning that builds futures. Adrian fixes the loose cabinet door I've been meaning to address. His toolbox lives in my hall closet now. Next to the vacuum cleaner and Thomas's old fishing gear. Tools that belong, that have purpose, that get used instead of stored. We don't talk about the lawsuit anymore. Urban Nest settled quietly. A small payment for my legal fees. An acknowledgement of overreach without admission of wrongdoing. Lawyers speak their own language. Full of words that mean nothing and everything. But the check cleared. Margot deposited it herself. Grinned like someone who'd won a bet nobody else knew she'd made. The building breathes around us. Sunday sounds. Family sounds. The kind that grow slowly instead of being imposed. Tommy pulls himself up against my leg. Looks at me with eyes that expect goodness from the world. I pick him up. Feel his solid weight against my chest. His trust heavy as responsibility. He smells like baby shampoo and possibilities. Like the future happening one breath at a time. Lila asks if I need anything from the store. She's driving to the grocery after lunch. Making a list that includes my requests without being asked. Small kindness. The kind that builds trust one Sunday at a time. I tell her we need milk. Bread. The good butter Thomas used to splurge on for special occasions. Every Sunday is special now. Adrian calls from the courtyard. The mint is taking over everything. Should he trim it back? I tell him to let it grow. Some things are supposed to spread. Some things improve the neighborhood by refusing boundaries. The afternoon light slants through windows I cleaned yesterday. Golden, warm, generous with illumination. I set the oak table for 4. White plates, cloth napkins. The silver Thomas polished every Christmas. Now it gets used for Sunday soup instead of holidays. For regular family instead of special occasions. Tommy sits in the high chair Adrian assembled last month. Bangs a spoon against the tray like he's conducting an orchestra only he can hear. Lila serves soup she made from scratch. Vegetables from the farmer's market. Stock simmered slow all morning. She's learned to cook with time instead of money. With patience instead of convenience. The soup tastes like Sunday. Like family that chose itself. Like love measured in small spoonfuls. Adrian tells us about work. About lives he saved this week. About the new EMT he's training who reminds him of himself 10 years ago. Eager. Scared. Certain he can fix everything if he just works hard enough. Adrian knows better now, knows that some things can't be fixed. Only supported, only witnessed, only held while they heal themselves. Lila talks about her new job. Part-time bookkeeping for small businesses. Work that uses her spreadsheet skills for good instead of manipulation. She helps people organize their money, build budgets, plan for futures they can actually afford. Real work, honest work, work that helps instead of disrupts. After lunch, Adrian installs the new smoke detector I bought. Climbs a stepladder with the concentration of someone who understands consequences. Safety first, always safety first. The lesson every EMT learns. The lesson every mother teaches. Lila washes dishes at my deep sink. Soap bubbles catching afternoon light. Her hands moving with the rhythm of someone who's found her place. Tommy naps on my sofa, sprawled like he owns the whole world. Like every soft surface was designed for his comfort. I watch him sleep. This child I didn't plan for. Didn't expect. Didn't know I needed. Thomas's great-grandchild. The future we didn't get to imagine together. But he's here now, safe in my house, surrounded by family that learned to ask before taking. The sun moves across my walls, marks the passage of another Sunday. Another small victory of love over logistics. At 5 o'clock they gather their things. Diaper bag, Tommy's favorite blanket, the casserole dish Lila insists on returning clean. Adrian hugs me at the yellow door. The same door that started all this trouble. All this truth. He smells like my soap. My coffee. My home that became his refuge. Lila kisses my cheek. Her lips soft as apology. As gratitude. As the daughter-in-law I hoped she could become. Tommy reaches for me from his car seat. Fat fingers grasping. Protesting separation from his grandmother who spoils him with attention. I touch his hand through the window. Promise him next Sunday. Promise him constancy. Promise him I'll be here. They drive away down Canary Street. Into whatever week waits for them. I stand on my front steps. Hand on the yellow door that holds everything together. The neighborhood settles into evening. Porch lights flickering on. Dinners being served. Families finding their rhythms. Mrs. Chen waters her roses. Waves across the street. Calls out that my mint is growing into her yard. I tell her to take whatever she wants. Good things should spread. Good neighbors should share. Inside my building, I brew evening tea. Sit at the oak table that survived another Sunday meal. The house creaks its familiar sounds. Pipes settling. Floors remembering the weight of footsteps. My sounds. My house. My family that chose to stay. Tomorrow is Monday. Ordinary. Predictable. Mine to fill however I choose. But Sunday will come again. With soup and repairs and a baby who thinks I hung the moon. With a son who learned to ask questions. A daughter-in-law who learned to tell the truth. A family rebuilt on foundations of respect. The yellow door stays yellow. The building stays mine. The boundaries stay clear. But inside those boundaries, love grows like mint. Stubborn, spreading, refusing to be contained by anyone's expectations. This is what family sounds like. When it's chosen. When it's honest. When it's built to last. 2 years have passed since I bought this building in secret. 2 years since I discovered my daughter-in-law hosting strangers in my kitchen. Since I learned the difference between invitation and invasion. The yellow door has weathered 2 winters. Seen 2 summers. Watched seasons change like promises kept. It needs touching up now. Small chips where the mailman's bag scraped. Fading where the sun hits hardest at noon. I could change the color. Choose something more practical. Something that hides where better. But yellow means something now. Yellow means choice. Yellow means mine. So yellow it stays. This morning I paint the small repairs myself. Steady strokes with a fine brush. The same brush I used for detail work 40 years ago. My hands remember the weight, the angle, the patience good work requires. Tommy watches from his stroller. 2 years old now, full of opinions about everything. He points at the paint can. Says yellow like he invented the word. Like he's teaching me something I don't know. Maybe he is. Lila pushes the stroller while I work. She's learned to move at grandmother pace. To let small repairs happen without rushing toward efficiency. She's pregnant again, 4 months along, showing just enough to make strangers smile at her in grocery stores. This baby was planned, discussed, budgeted for in spreadsheets that make sense instead of dreams. Real planning, the kind that builds futures instead of monuments to ambition. Adrian arrives with sandwiches and cold coffee. His lunch break stretched to include family time. He's learned to schedule people instead of emergencies. To choose presence over productivity when it matters. We eat on my front steps. Tommy between us. Crumbs falling onto concrete that children have claimed with chalk and laughter. The dragon they drew last summer faded into suggestion. New art takes its place. A garden of flowers drawn in sidewalk chalk by hands too small to stay inside lines. Beautiful because it refuses boundaries. Beautiful because it believes in color. Mrs. Chen brings me mint tea. Made with leaves from the runners that escaped my courtyard. That colonized her garden without asking permission. Some invasions improve the neighborhood. Some boundaries need crossing. We sit in the shade of her umbrella. Drink tea that tastes like summer and forgiveness. Watch Tommy chase pigeons who understand the game better than he does. Mrs. Chen asks about my plans. Whether I'll sell when the market peaks. Whether I'll move somewhere easier for an aging woman. I tell her this is easier. This yellow door. These Sunday dinners. This family rebuilt on honesty instead of management. Easy isn't about stairs or shopping. Easy is about being known. About having your rhythms witnessed. About coffee brewed the way you like it by people who remember. That evening I sit in my upstairs kitchen. The one with windows that frame the city like postcards. I think about Thomas. About what he would make of all this. The building. The boundaries. The grandchildren who carry his laugh in their voices. He would approve of the yellow door. He always liked things that announced themselves. That refused to blend into backgrounds. He would love Tommy's stubborn chin. The way he demands attention without apologizing for taking up space. He would probably worry about Lila. The way I worried. Until she proved that people can learn. That mistakes don't define futures. That family can be rebuilt on firmer foundations. My phone lights up. Text from Adrian. Just a photo. Tommy asleep in his car seat. Mouth open. Trust written across his sleeping face. No words needed. Just the evidence of love freely given. Of peace earned through honesty. Of family that chose itself. I save the photo. Add it to the album I started 2 years ago. Pictures of Sunday dinners. Birthday cakes. First steps. Ordinary moments that build extraordinary lives. The album sits on my coffee table. Next to Thomas's reading glasses. Next to bills that get paid on time. Next to keys that open doors I chose. Outside my window, Canary Street settles into evening quiet. Porch lights blinking on. Families gathering around dinner tables. The daily miracle of people choosing each other again. Tomorrow I'll finish painting the door. Touch up the spots I missed. Make it bright enough to welcome. Strong enough to last. Lila will come by with fabric samples. For the nursery in their new apartment. The one they rented 2 blocks away. Close enough to visit. Far enough to choose. Distance that honors instead of suffocates. Proximity that respects instead of assumes. Adrian will install the new light fixture I bought. LED bulbs that will outlast me. That will illuminate whatever family comes next. Because this building will outlast me. These walls will shelter other stories. Other Sunday dinners. Other boundaries drawn and honored. But for now, it's mine. My yellow door. My oak table. My mint that refuses reasonable limits. My family that learned to ask before taking. To respect before demanding. To love without managing. The city breathes around me. 8 million people making choices. Building boundaries. Painting doors whatever color speaks to them. Some will learn what I learned. That family isn't just blood. That home isn't just where you sleep. That love isn't just letting people do what they want. Love is also saying no. Setting limits. Choosing who gets keys to the most important doors. Love is yellow paint touched up with patience. Sunday soup served on good plates. Coffee brewed in percolators that remember how things used to taste. Love is mint that spreads where it wants. Children who draw dragons on sidewalks. Grandmothers who refuse to be managed by good intentions. The yellow door stays yellow. The boundaries stay clear. The building stays mine until I choose otherwise. And every Sunday, family gathers around tables that remember what honest sounds like. What chosen feels like. What home means when it's built on respect instead of assumption. Some people never learn the difference between invitation and entitlement. Between family and ownership. Between love and taking what you want. But some do learn. Some people choose to ask instead of assume. To respect instead of manage. To build instead of inherit. Those people get Sunday dinners. Get keys to yellow doors. Get coffee brewed exactly right by grandmothers who remember their names. Those people get to be family. Real family. The kind that lasts because it's chosen every day instead of just assumed. The kind that honors boundaries. That respects doors. That understands that love sometimes means painting the same color twice. Because yellow means choice. Yellow means home. Yellow means mine until I decide otherwise. And I'm not deciding otherwise today.